Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched The Bear season 3. Let's talk about it. So yes, we finally got the 3rd season of The Bear. I say finally, but last season came out almost exactly a year ago, which is pretty much unheard of for streaming series these days. So I feel like The Bear as a production is pretty consistent, which is a welcome thing to have in this TV era. But anyways, because of how hyped, because of how incredible, magnificent, brilliant season 2 was, I was of course counting down the days. I was of course counting down the seconds until we got the 3rd season, until we finally got a chance to see what happened to Carmy when he was stuck in that fridge. Like, when did he finally get released from that goddamn fridge, and what happened next? This is a question that's been itching on my mind for the last year, and we finally got the answers to said question. And today's video, I'm going to be diving into my thoughts on the answers that season 3 provided us with. there were some interesting choices here which we will discuss, but before we get into that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Okay, now without further ado, let's get into this. Let's get into the Chicago mess. So first of all, we have the follow-up on Carmy's storyline. And in season 2, as I mentioned, Carmy was stuck in a fridge. Carmy was stuck in a fridge of his own making because he had failed to follow through on several tasks when it came to opening up the bear. Season 2 was all about the creation of the bear and dealing with all of the nuts and bolts and paperwork that came with opening up or reopening this restaurant. But now that the bear has officially been opened, season 3 takes us on the journey of figuring out how to run a functioning and operational restaurant, especially in its early days, and especially a restaurant that's being run by Carmy and Sydney, who both have huge aspirations for where this project could go. Now, because Carmy fell so behind when it came to focusing on the details of the restaurant, he kind of lost his way as he pursued his relationship with Claire. But it seems like season 3 is all about Carmy trying to rectify that, but inevitably he goes too far in the opposite direction. He becomes too focused on the restaurant, on creating new recipes. He becomes obsessive, and it kind of draws back to his years working in Michelin-star restaurants under that extremely stressful and ultimately traumatic environment that had horrible effects on his mental health and well-being, but created a mastermind, a genius in the culinary arts in him. And so he has decided to swing back into that kind of mindset. He is hyper-focused on the objectives, the non-negotiables as he calls them, for the restaurant, and he has taken a somewhat dictatorship approach to rectifying the mistakes that he made, by the way, the mistakes that he made in season 2. And I just thought that was such an interesting choice from Carmy. Like, I just thought that was really interesting. It annoyed the hell out of me because it was supposed to. Like, that's what the script intended, for me to be annoyed as hell by this man. Because what do you mean you are the one that was flaking? You are the one that was distracted by Claire. Oh Claire, I've never been a real boy before, Claire. Show me the world. Like, he was the one that was going out partying, that was getting distracted, that forgot to call the guy that was supposed to fix the fridge, and then of course he inevitably ended up stuck in it. It was all him. Everyone else was buckling down. You had Tina taking those cooking classes. You had Sydney doing everything. Sydney doing literally everything to get this place up and running. And then when the going got tough, she was there managing the ship like a true captain. Even Richie stepped up. He had a whole beautiful arc in the episode called Forks, which came out as one of the best episodes of not just this series, but of television ever created. Honestly, it was an incredible episode that portrayed an incredible arc that Richie went on from being a useless bum, a useless annoying bum that was getting on my nerves, to someone who had finally found his purpose in this environment. It was a beautiful arc to witness. And so everyone had gotten their shit together. Even Ibra didn't take a liking to the traditional, culinary school that Tina really hit the ground running with, but he managed to find a compromise. He still got to work at the window, selling the sandwiches, doing what he knew and loved. And so he also has a place in this new establishment. And then of course you have Marcus. Oh my goodness, Marcus, who was working under the toughest of circumstances. His mother was really, really ill, but he still showed his commitment to his craft and bettering his craft. So much so that Carmy sent him off all the way to Denmark. Is it Denmark or Norway? I keep forgetting. But he sent him off to Scandinavia to get some extra training from Luke. Listen, we will discuss Luke. We will discuss Luke later, okay? But Marcus thrived in that environment and he learned so much. He was able to hone his craft. And so it was just a beautiful arc for everyone at the Bear. My whole Chicago family was thriving. Except who? Except Carmy. But because he was the one that was stuck in the fridge, because he was the one, okay, that was slacking, now he sees it fit to single-handedly change the direction of the entire establishment and create this list of non-negotiables that everyone has to abide by without even the consultation of his so-called partner. The partner that he keeps insisting needs to sign the agreement, even though she's not quite sure if he's acting upon the agreement on the day-to-day basis. We will discuss Sydney's storyline in a minute. Back to Carmy. So Carmy was pissing me off, obviously. Carmy was pissing me off because that's what he does, okay? And one of his many bright ideas this season that really just took the cake in terms of pissing me off, in terms of annoying the crap out of me, and also befuddling me, also genuinely confusing me. And that was the decision to have a changing menu for each and every night. Now listen, okay? I have never been to a Michelin star restaurant, okay? I'm not amongst the upper echelons of society, so I don't roam around in those circles. So perhaps it is the case that these top restaurants are out here changing their menus every single day. But to me as a layperson, to me as a regular old Joe Blogs, okay, that seemed like the most ridiculous idea I'd ever imagined. That seemed like the most ridiculous idea that I'd ever heard, because to me, one of the markers of a successful restaurant is to have repeat customers, is to have people coming in every single time, loving the dishes that they're served. And in order to do that, you need to have good staple dishes that people can come to the restaurant for, and they can reorder their favorites. Like that's what's going on in my mind. That's what's going on in my mind, okay? But maybe I'm just too poor to understand. Because for me, in my experience, I tend to return to the restaurants near me to grab my staples, to grab my favorites. And so I can't imagine returning to a restaurant where the menu is going to be completely different each and every time. I feel like that's something that specific types of customers would enjoy, like foodies, people who are really into fine dining. Maybe they would seek that sort of novelty out. But for the layperson, I just feel like it's so niche that it would kind of shut out a lot of your customers. But I guess in the world of the Bear, that's not an issue, especially because Carmy is a well-known chef and he has dealt in fine dining. So like, I'm not saying I'm more of an expert than him. I'm not saying that in the slightest. I'm just saying, especially considering the fact that he's not in Upper Manhattan anymore. He's in Chicago, in like a downtown area of Chicago. So it kind of boggles the mind that he made this decision. But honestly, the show doesn't really dive into the wider socio-economic implications of this decision. They're mostly looking at it from a micro perspective, which is that it's really expensive to make this happen. All of the R&D that Carmy is doing and just, trying to manifest this menu each and every night is super expensive. And so here you have Cicero. And so here you have Uncle Cicero knocking, banging at Carmy's door, being like, what the hell, man? You are bleeding me dry. Like, what is this changing menu nonsense? It's costing me an arm, a leg, the other arm, a foot. Like, what's happening here? And Carmy's just like, no. Like, this is part of my process. This is what I want to do. I'm going to get you that star, Sydney. And Sydney's like, but you said the star was BS. Like, Carmy has just completely switched gears. That time in the fridge messed him up. It's frozen some decent brain cells, and he has swiftly gone in the opposite direction, and it is hellish to witness. Now, in terms of my thoughts on this particular storyline, aside from the fact that Carmy was pissing me off as per usual, okay, I felt like, you know, whilst I, of course, always enjoy scenes where there's chaos and madness in that kitchen, like, I live for that. This is my dysfunctional Chicago family. So I've come to expect these scenes from this show, and I very much enjoy them. I think the actors deliver on them each and every time. That scene where Carmy and Richie were just saying F you to each other like children with the mouths of sailors was magnifique. Like, this is what I come for. This is what I know and love about the show. So that's all well and good. But when it comes to this storyline, I couldn't help but feel like we're kind of running around in circles. This is season 3 now. We should be getting a little bit more character progression from this character. Like, I just want a little bit more development. I want us to move to the next step. It feels like Carmy has just gone full circle back to how he was at the beginning of season 1. And like, we've done this before. We've learned those lessons. Like, we need to move on. We need to continue growing. Now, I understand, you know, intellectually what the series is trying to do. In season 1, you have this, you know, fresh off the boat, and by the boat I mean coming out of Michelin star restaurants, young chef who's a genius, but he's suffering a huge tragic loss, and so he's trying to figure out how his, you know, background in fine dining would work with this, you know, sandwich shop. You know, there's this restaurant that his brother created and managed. He's trying to figure things out there. So that's your season 1, and then you have the introduction of Sydney, who helps try and meld these two worlds together and bring some harmony to this whole thing, and they embark on this, you know, new project together to create the bear. And then season 2 is all about the actual making of the restaurant, the bricks, the bolts, the woodwork, the bursting toilet, you know, all of that good stuff that we came to love from season 2. And then in the end, you have the restaurant being open and things look like they might be going well. All is fine and dandy, except for the man himself. Okay, except for Bazado himself, who's just absolutely lost the plot because he was trying to have a life for once in his life. And then season 3, you have him reverting because he made the mistake of bringing someone into his life, falling in love, enjoying his life. Of course, that was a horrible error on his part, and so he's trying to rectify that, but he's going too far in the opposite direction. So I understand what they've done with Carmy's arc. I understand the story that they're trying to take us on, but I do think that it's quite repetitive at this point, and as a viewer, it's becoming quite frustrating seeing Carmy make the same old mistakes time and time again, and, you know, having to say the same old apologies and not acting upon them. The main difference between season 1 Carmy and season 3 Carmy is that he acknowledges now, you know, when he's slipping up, when he's making things really difficult and challenging for people, and he'll have these like brief 3-word sentences like 4-word phrases where he'll be like, I'm trying to do better, and it's like, okay, is that an apology? What's the plan? How are you gonna be? But like, what's the timeline? Like literally no information whatsoever. And then in the next day, he'll end up doing the same thing again. So it's just really frustrating seeing this character kind of circle this type of storyline time and time again. Now, another thing that annoyed the hell out of me when it came to Carmy's storyline this season is something that you won't be surprised by if you watch my season 2 review. By the way, if you haven't seen my season 2 review, go ahead and check it out. The review from last year was a riot. Okay, we had so much fun in the comment section. But if you've already watched it, then you already know what I'm about to say. You already know what I'm about to say. Claire. Let's talk about her. Claire's back. For some reason, now some of you will already know how I feel about Claire and the fact that she poses a threat to my end game, okay, to my mission, to my plan, to my vision, which is SYD-Carmy, but more on that later, okay? So on that front, I'm already annoyed at Claire because she's like in the way of my vision. She's not a part of what I want to happen for this show. But aside from that, the character just pisses me off on all fronts because they try so hard. They try so hard to tell us that Claire is a big deal, but I just never saw it. I'm sorry. And maybe I'm biased because I'm a Sydney lover, whatever, but I just never saw any spark, any chemistry, any great love story when it was presented to me in season 2. And it doesn't help that she came on board in season 2 instead of being sprinkled in season 1 and then becoming a big deal in season 2, because all of a sudden everyone was like, oh, Claire Bear, like she's a big deal. And I'm like, I've never heard of this chick before in my life. Who is she? And what is she doing here? And when is she gonna go? Like, it was just really annoying in season 2 seeing her pop up all the time, everyone acting like she's been there the whole time, and I'm like, no, you just introduced her right now. But in season 3 it becomes even more annoying because this series loves it a good flashback, it loves it a good montage, a quick fire montage of a bunch of scenes that came before. And a lot of these montages that are going on in Carmy's mind feature Claire, and I'm like, this is just doing too much. This is just doing way too much to force us to believe that Claire is a big deal in Carmy's life and in his mind and heart. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. I just do not buy it. And it seems so forced and so annoying at this point. And in the end, guess what? He doesn't do anything. After all of that humming and hawing and agonizing, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't pick up the phone to call her. He doesn't even text her. He does nothing at all to rectify the situation after the horrible things that he said to her in response to her telling him that she loved him. He doesn't do anything to rectify it in this season. So at this point, I'm just like, leave it alone. Especially because several months pass in this season. Like in the first episode, we're only a couple of days after the fridge incident, but by the end a couple of months have passed. And so, like, can we just drop this? They're not going to drop it because they really want it to be a big deal, but I think that is a gross mistake. And I've seen many people online say a similar thing because the character is just really frustrating. But unlike season 2, where it was partially her fault and the lines that she was given to say, like, oh, they were just really cringe. But in season 3, it generally wasn't even her fault. She was just out here minding her business, being an EMT. Like, she wasn't doing anything wrong, but instead she got harassed at work. Instead, like, she was being, questioned and investigated at work by the facts. Oh, we'll talk about the facts. And so it's literally not her fault this time around. But the writers just need to call it quits. They just need to take the L on this one, because if I have to sit through another season of Carmy agonizing over Claire for no apparent reason, I'm gonna lose my shit. Then we will have real issues. Okay. Now, season 3 ends off with one of the best episodes of the entire season, and it's the funeral service for Terry, who is of course portrayed by the iconic Olivia Colman's restaurant. Yes, Terry has decided to retire, which is frightening to see because she is of course a chef that Carmy has very much looked up to and admired. He worked under her and learned so much, and so to see her closing the restaurant, not because it wasn't doing well or because she was bankrupt or anything like that, but simply because she wanted to have a life, simply because she wanted to open up a new chapter in her life, and she was just tired of the chef life. That's clearly having an impact on Carmy emotionally and mentally, and hopefully it will allow him to see that what he really wants to aim for with the restaurant, is a balance between between the two, a balance between being Carmy, the legendary genius culinary artist, with being Carmy Bizzato, you know, brother of Mikey, friend to all of the staff and family of the bear, you know, new uncle. We don't even see him meet his niece. Jesus Christ. You know, like, he has so many other parts of his identity in his personal life that he can embrace, you know, future husband to Sydney, like other parts of his identity, and he can meld them together to form the perfect harmony that the restaurant could represent. And I think Terry's retirement is a sort of sneak peek into that, and my hope is that he'll come to that realization before he has a literal mental break yet again, because he's gone too far in the opposite direction. And speaking of having a mental break, in episode 10 we finally get that sort of emotional catharsis, sort of, where Carmy confronts his old boss, okay, the guy that's played by Joel from Community. Yeah, that terrifying figure that haunts his dreams, nightmares, and quick fire montages. He's always in there telling Carmy that he's not good enough, that he's worthless, that he's a piece of shit, and all of that. Yeah, well, he actually showed up in person for the funeral service, and Carmy was shook. You know, the entire time these other chefs are talking about their experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, the wonderful, and Carmy is just staring. Carmy is just fixing his piercing blue eyes on this man and just saying all of that stuff. Like, you can see all of the stuff that he said out loud eventually just kind of circulating in his brain in that moment. Like, he was practicing that speech the entire time. And then when the guy gets up, Carmy follows him, and it's like, oh, that's not going to be good. That is not going to be good. And I was expecting him to start swinging, to be honest. And he would have been well within his rights to do so. But Carmy probably has too much respect for Terry to, you know, tarnish her goodbye service in that way. And also, not to mention, he was like terrified as shit. Like, he was frozen in his spot and just so awkward and nervous, but also so angry. And so I'm glad that he did get to express, you know, his feelings and really told the chef guy, yeah, all of the stuff that he put him through. But I say that it wasn't really a moment of catharsis, because the chef just kind of looked at him and said, yeah, but I made you. Like, yeah, but look at what you've become. Look at what I led you to become. You've achieved greatness. You've achieved excellence. You're welcome. He literally says, you're welcome. I could never, I would have to slap him, actually. It would have to be on site, actually. He said, you're welcome. He said, you know, all that trauma, ooh, all that PTSD, the ulcers, the smoking, ooh, but look at what you've become. Look at what I made you. You're welcome. Like, that's what he's and honestly, even though in that moment I wanted to slap that man in his face with those Tom Ford glasses just whipping off, but I have to admit, Joe McHale, he nailed it. Like, he absolutely nailed it with that line delivery, the smugness, the narcissism, the evil. Like, he was a true villain, and he did not disappoint with that final episode. And Carmy was just there, like, stuttering, mumbling, but he still, you know, expressed himself. He still said what he needed to, and I think it was a turning point moment for him. That and his discussion with Terry hopefully will lead to him changing his tactics a little bit, and like I said, reaching that kind of hybrid point where he embraces all parts of himself to put into the identity of the restaurant. And hopefully there'll be space for others in that as well. Let's talk about the others now. Let's talk about my good sister Sydney, and let's just put aside her storyline for a second to just inject my commentary here on the presence of Ayo Edebiri in general in season 3. Yeah, where was she? Where was she? Like, I know that my sister is booked and busy. I know that much for sure. Just look at her IMDb page. Okay, it's looking like 2023, 2024, 2025, stacked on stacked on stacked. But I do feel like she was available for the shooting of this season. So why was it that she was given nary a line? Why was it that she was given nary a scene? Why was it that I saw Claire on my screen more than I saw Sydney? What's going on there? That seemed really bizarre to me. Carmy, and I know that the series is called The Bear. I know that Carmy Bazzato has always been the main character, but I thought the show and Christopher Storer, the creator and writer and director, oftentimes, although apart from one episode when Io directed, and that was Tina's episode, she did a great job there. But anyways, I know that Carmy's the main character, but I thought that Christopher understood that Sydney had become extremely popular. She's an icon, she's a legend, and so we want to see more from her. I thought the writers understood that, but instead they gave us less, and that's just mind-boggling. When it comes to the press for the show and even awards season, remember that awards season was a double act with Io and Jeremy Allen White, and of course Eben Moss-Bachrach, following on with his own wins. But those two were the stars. Those two were the stars for the series. So it seems really baffling to me to have Io be sidelined so spectacularly for season 3. I thought that was a huge, massive waste, and I hope that they plan to reimburse us in season 4. And now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about this partnership, because what the hell is going on? I think that Sydney is well within her rights to pause, take a breather and think about what she's signing on to after the nonsense and mess that she has witnessed. First of all, number one, that would give anyone pause, because these people are clearly not serious people. Like, these people are wild and crazy and foolish, so that already would give you pause. But two, considering how Carmy is once again acting after the so-called improvements that we saw from season 1 and early season 2, considering the fact that he's regressed once again, of course Sydney would be anxious. Of course she would be nervous about signing on and fully committing to this thing, because it seems like each and every day he is pushing her out. Even though he keeps saying that they're partners, he keeps saying that they're in it together and that he values her inputs and her creativity and opinions, but his actions suggest otherwise, because he's doing everything in a dictatorship way. He's the one that's creating the non-negotiables, printing them out before Sydney can even get a chance to glance at them. He's the one that keeps changing the menu. He's the one that's decided that the menu needs to change each and every day. He is calling all of the shots, and it doesn't seem like a partnership anymore. He hasn't given her a chance to put her own thumbprint on this project in a while. Every single time she's tried to, he's changed things single-handedly without consultation, or he's told her that it isn't ready, which is something that played on her mind, as we saw in season 3. And so clearly what we're seeing here is that Carmy is becoming Joe McHale. Carmy is becoming his own worst enemy, and that is starting to have an impact on Sydney. And this is where I absolutely draw the line. You don't come for my sister. Word to Beyonce. You don't come for my sister. Okay? Because no, that's where we have a problem. Sydney out here having panic attacks. Sydney out here stressing, hyperventilating, crawling, rocking back and forth on the floor outside of her own apartment. Sydney out here mirroring the actions and the trauma that Carmy has exhibited for the last 2 seasons of the show. Sydney now has that. It's been transferred over to her. Absolutely not. I need to get my sister out of there. She needs to go with that chef, that was working under Terry. Yeah, she needs to go with him ASAP. And it breaks my heart to say this, as the captain of the Sid Carmy ship. You already know. If you watched that video last year, you already know. But I can't stand for this toxicity. I can't stand for this madness and chaos. It is clearly having a detrimental impact on Sydney. And she is too bright, too wonderful, too beautiful, too much of a genius to be dealing with this crap. So no. We need to get my sister out of there. I'm sick and tired of Carmy's antics. He needs to sort himself out, and I wish him the best on that front. But in the meantime, my sister needs to go. And it breaks my heart, but it just needs to happen. Now, season 3 refuses to give us a resolution to any of these storylines, actually, which we'll talk about in a second. So many things to discuss. I already told you, right? But season 3 doesn't actually resolve resolve the whole does Sydney decide to jump ship storyline. So we'll have to wait until season 4 to get a resolution to that. And originally they had planned to film seasons 3 and 4 back to back, but as I saw online, apparently this plan changed because the script for season 4 wasn't ready yet, and I'm glad that they waited until the release of season 3 to finalize that script, because season 3, I don't know if you've seen, but people have had some thoughts on season 3 and the reviews aren't quite as glowing as they were for season 2, mine included. And so I think it's a good thing that they need to kind of get back to basics and, you know, take a look at the script for season 4, because if they're headed in the same direction that season 3 was, then they're headed towards a car crash. So I'm glad it wasn't filmed back to back, and I hope that they rectify the issues of season 3 in season 4. And it makes me super curious to see what Sydney will ultimately decide for her career. But in terms of her mental health, in terms of her physical health, everything, we really do need to reassess this partnership nonsense, because Carmy has not been delivering on his end. Last season it was bad enough that she was holding up the whole fort on her own shoulders, but this season he's kind of ripped away all of that responsibility and just driven the ship by himself, despite the fact that she did such a good job in taking them to that point. And that's just another level of disrespect as well. So it's a struggle, man. It's a struggle. But my sister needs to do what's best for her, and that might mean heading over to that chef that used to work under Terry. But I have another solution. I have another Now I know I'm the captain of the Sid Carmy ship, and I will go down with my ship, but we're just gonna dock on over. To the SYD-LUCA ship for just 1 second. For just 1 second of the day. Okay, we're just taking a little break, okay, to this little remote island called the SYD-LUCA. LUCA Sid. We're working on the name. But the SYD-LUCA island is our next stop, and we might stay here for a couple of nights. I don't know. Because listen, episode 10 was giving me ideas. Episode 10 was giving me thoughts, and I would love it. I would absolutely love it if Will Poulter became more of a series regular on the show. I think he's a welcome addition to the cast. I think he fit in brilliantly, unlike some other additions that we saw this season. I would adore it if this season gave us a collaboration between Sydney and Luca. I think that they would work really well together if they started their own project. You know, if they got their own restaurant up and running, I think that would be really fascinating to see. But they're not going to give us this though, because this series isn't called Sydney and Luca, it's called The Bear. And so that man has to be involved in some way, shape or form. But I think there's something there. I think that's actually the perfect compromise between those of you who believe Sydney should be with Marcus for some reason, even though that's clearly friend energy, whatever. And those of us who used to have hope in the Sid Carmy ship. I think Sid and Luca, that's like that. Is that not the best of both? What is that not? Walk with me here, walk with me. Let me know down in the comments if you agree. So now we can kind of get into some of the other characters and storylines. Honestly, there wasn't much elsewhere. A lot of the air in the room was sucked up by Carmy and his nonsense, and so there wasn't really much left behind for anyone else. We did get that episode on Tina where we finally got her backstory, which was nice, although I do feel like it would have fitted better in season 2, where we saw her, you know, pursuing and doing well in culinary school. I think that would have been a better fit. It's kind of odd that we kind of got it dropped in the middle of season 3 and then we didn't get much else from her apart from some encouraging scenes between Sydney and Tina. That's always really nice to see. And then of course we got the series of funerals. We did get a glimpse into Mikey's funeral in the past, which was really sad. And then we fast forward to the present day where we ultimately saw what happened to Marcus's mother. She passed away, as many of us suspected, and we got to see the gang join Marcus in his mother's funeral, which again was very tragic. But overall, I would say that storyline was really undercooked as well. The most that we got from Marcus this season is him dabbling in some new recipes that are related to his mother and reminded him of her, like the violet balance, for instance, and one was white and that was significant and all of that. And you know, you have scenes between him and Sydney where they're friends. Okay, their friendship is showing through the screen, and that's nice. It's nice that she seems to be the only person who gives a shit about him, even though Carmy has known him for longer, whatever. But Carmy doesn't have time for anyone, so Marcus shouldn't take it personally. Anywho, but yeah, overall, I would say that storyline was really undercooked, because it basically made up of people asking Marcus if he was okay and him saying, yeah, I'm fine. But clearly he wasn't. But there wasn't like an outburst or a breakdown or anything following that. And so it just felt like it led to nowhere. And then, of course, Sugar finally gave birth. Sugar finally gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. And we got a whole episode diving into that birth story with the return of her mother, Jamie Lynn Curtis, who does an amazing job portraying Donna. She's just really fantastic in this role. And again, a welcome addition, a welcome addition to the cast of The Bear. Like, she nails it each and every time. This episode was no different. Although the episode annoyed me somewhat because it was just so convenient. Like, why on earth did they send Sugar out to buy the Seafolds? Like, this heavily pregnant woman is going to be dragged out to a warehouse to carry a bunch of heavy, but like, why is no one thinking with a bit of this? Why is no one using a bit of it? Like, it's just a bit like, okay. And they sent her out on her own. Not even someone to accompany her. None of the facts could have done this. Neither of the facts could be bothered to go out there and do this. Isn't that their job? Like, they're trying to cut back on expenditure, but the facts are still there employed, not even doing the bare minimum. And I know that Sugar refused, but like, that's just dumb. Like, she's heavily pregnant. Like, that's dumb. That's dumb writing. So yeah, I wasn't overly impressed with that, but the episode was sweet. Even though I do feel like we could have popped in and out of other storylines during that episode to make it a little bit more dynamic. I do feel like it went on for a bit too long, and I wasn't like 1,000% invested in each and every conversation that Sugar was having with her mother. Obviously, we know that Sugar had a lot of, you know, childhood trauma and a lot of baggage when it came to her relationship with her mother, as we saw from various scenes in season 2, but especially the fishes episode. But even though it was heartening to see her mother be a part of the birth of her first ever child, the episode itself, it wasn't the most compelling. I was a bit bored. I'll just say it. I was a bit bored, and I felt like they could have done something else to dramatize it and give it a bit more flavor. And then finally, to round out the gang, you have the Facts, the return of the Facts brothers. You have more of the second Fact brother, whose name escapes me, but yeah, he was heavily featured in this season, and they were the comedic relief, right? Like, they were the comedic relief, and that brings me to one of the overarching issues that I have with the series, which we'll dive into now. Finally, I've been promising this whole time, right? But yeah, overarching problem number 1 was the comedic relief situation. Now, this is clearly in response to people complaining that The Bear continues to compete in the comedic categories for these major awards, even though it's not a comedy. I personally have always found The Bear to be hilarious. To me, the series has always leaned into a more intelligent and kind of understated comedy, like comedic irony or sarcasm. The comedy has always been there. It's just not yuck, chuckle, laughing track comedy. But unfortunately, the naysayers have been loud enough to actually affect the writer's room. And so in come the clowns, in come the Fact brothers, yucking it up, trying desperately to be the comedic relief that everyone desperately wants, apparently. And it's ruined everything. It's ruined the finely tuned formula that The Bear had between drama, tragedy, and comedy. It's just upset the balance so disastrously, and I hated every single second of it. The Fact brothers work as comedic relief when they're used in moderation, and we're talking moderate moderation, like just a sprinkling. I mean, this season was all about trying to take away elements from the dish. Yeah, they needed to take away a lot of the Fact brothers because they overdid it completely this time around. And ironically, it was likely done to secure their place in the comedy categories in these award shows. But because it was executed so poorly, they'll be lucky if they're even considered for these awards for season 3. Which leads me to the biggest issue, and that is that season 3 of The Bear is actually season 2.5. Season 3 of The Bear is not a season in its own right. It's a precursor to a full season. This is an in-betweener situation where they're setting up for the next big thing that hopefully will come in season 4. This does not feel like a complete story. It doesn't stand well on its own. It just feels like a little bit of a continuation of season 2. And quite frankly, they could have just made this whole 10 episode season into about 4 episodes, 5 episodes max, and tacked it along to season 2. Maybe done a part 1 on a part 2 of season 2 if they really have to, like Netflix does. But yeah, this season just does not stand on its own. It really does not. There are no new storylines this season. Did you notice? Like, there's nothing that actually happens that's unique to season 3. It's just a continuation on from season 2. Season 2 had its own thing where they were building the restaurant from the ground up. Both Carmy and Sydney were finally getting to realize their visions and their dreams for what the restaurant could be. Like, that was the purpose of season 2. And season 3 is just a slight continuation of that, with, yes, some added issues when it came to financing and dealing with customers. But like, there weren't any brand new challenges that were presented in season 3. It's all a continuation of season 2. Therefore, season 3 is actually season 2.5, and it really does not stand on its own whatsoever. And I don't appreciate being lied to. And yes, I am happy to wait for season 4. Yes, I will of course be there on the day. I will be seated, make no mistake. But it doesn't change the fact that because season 3 wasn't treated as its own entity, and it wasn't given enough of a story, it wasn't given enough, just enough. It didn't even have some signature episodes like Fishes or Forks that we saw in season 2. None of the episodes in season 3 reached that threshold of brilliance and excellence, which is bizarre because you'd think that they would have learned from what they did previously, but they really buckled with this one. And it certainly doesn't help that about 50% of the screen time of season 3 is made up of flashbacks of either what came before the show or scenes that we've already seen from the show, and it doesn't actually drive the story forward. And the reason why they needed that filler is because, say it with me, they didn't have enough story for this season. So yes, guys, I do think that season 3 of The Bear had its issues, but make no mistake, this show is still one of my favorite shows of all time. I still think it's one of the best shows on television today, and I am still counting down the seconds, okay, until season 4. And I do think that because season 3 was more of a bridge between season 2 and 4, that season 4 will hopefully deliver more excellence, more brilliance, and more story and more screen time for Sydney. One can only hope, okay? But in the meantime, I'm going to be giving The Bear season 3 an 8 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on The Bear season 3, it's time for you guys to let me know. I can't wait to hear your comments. You guys, let me know what you thought of The Bear season 3 down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch your videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.